radial string-like extension. And with this, I'd like to give the floor to Martine Rothblatt, who will be giving the best.
Thank you, Giulio, and I want to also thank the Italian Transhumanist Association for convening TransVision 2010. I missed the annual TransVision meeting, so it's good to see that they've started again. And I'd like to start by saying that the program organizers did a really good job of figuring out which presentations to group together, because I agree completely with Aubrey when he says that we have to pursue multiple paths. And so this is, what I'm talking about today is only one of many, many sticks in the bundle of efforts to allow us to live as long as we like. And then also my presentation follows so naturally from Max's presentation, because as Giulio said, ultimately it all becomes about who am I and what's the definition of self. And Max did such a great job about that. Today I kind of have a narrow topic, which is that many critics from the fields of neuroscience in particular claim that it's impossible to create consciousness outside of the human brain. I think they probably mean it's impossible to create the human consciousness outside of the human brain, because even some of these neuroscientists are willing to agree to some sort of consciousness even in non-human animals. But I'm actually, I have a fervent belief that it is possible to create the human minds in IT substrate. And I'm trying to communicate the gist of this idea with this metaphor or analogy that brains are to minds as birds are to flight. So one of the most prolific authors in the field of consciousness is Gerald Edelman, who won a Nobel Prize in medicine and biology. His main expertise is in the immune system, but his main publications are in consciousness. And here's a typical quote from one of his books. One illusion I hope to dispel is the notion that our brains are computers and that consciousness could emerge from computation. He's not the only one who feels this way. In fact, I think it's a fairly common point of view, not only from biologists, but even from some mathematicians such as Roger Penrose. But it seems to me that it was also a common view around the turn of the last century that people felt that birds are not planes and planes are not birds, and that flight could not emerge from aircraft. Even within months of when the Wright brothers had their flight, the prevailing view of experts was that planes could not replicate what birds do because they were not birds. So this, of course, brings to mind the famous quotation from Arthur C. Clarke that when a famous scientist states something is possible, he is almost certainly right. When he states something is impossible, he is probably wrong. The actual quotation also has the adjective elderly, I think, or aged in front of the word famous. But here I'm going to quote my famous quotation from Aubrey de Grey, that old people are people too. So really the focus of my talk this morning is why don't famous scientists like cyber consciousness? Most of them don't. Looks kind of cute to me. Well, the main argument, which is made by Dr. Edelman and many of his group, is that brains are very, very complex. And they get down to the level of neuroanatomy and show how brains are amazingly complex. The most complex things that we know of in the entire universe. And they tend to look at computers and say computers are very, very simple. Linear. One input, one output. Running a tape in the classic sense of Turing's universal computing machine. And then the famous scientists say, how could something very simple do the same thing as something so complex? It cannot. And therefore they argue that brains are not computers. Computers cannot do what brains do. But also, we have to admit that planes are not birds. And yet, we still fly. We fly really fantastically. So what gives? Why do they rely on this explanation, which even by comparison with birds in flight, would seem to be a weak explanation? Again, building on Max's excellent presentation, I think that the real reaction is that, the real reason is that there's a kind of overreaction in normal science today against Cartesian dualism, against the idea that, that I think, therefore I am, is something that is separate from the underlying biology that gives rise to the thinking. And the normal scientists are so afraid of separating thought from matter that they have jumped to the conclusion that the mind must be embodied in biology. This way we can be sure we're not talking about spiritual, immeasurable, spooky things. I agree that the mind must definitely be embodied. I do not believe that there is a spiritual mind sitting around outside any body. But I do think that software and hardware can do as well as wetware and fleshware. But once again, we meet the objection from biologists. They say that the brain is vastly more complex than the computer. How can it be embodied in software and hardware? I call this image mindgasm. But birds are way more complex than airplanes, jets, and other aircraft. We shouldn't think that birds are simple. They're not. They are really complex, as amazing in their own right as brains are amazing. For example, top planes have about 6 million parts. And before you think that's complex, even the normal birds we see have over 100 billion parts. So we're talking not just 1,000 times more complicated or 10,000 times more complicated, close to 100,000 times more complicated than a plane in just a very simple bird. So we still fly, we fly high, we fly far. So I think just like you don't have to replicate a bird to fly, you don't have to copy a brain to be conscious. It's not about complexity. Now, birds and jets do differ. Jets and planes don't fly like birds. And I think cyber-conscious minds will also differ from biological minds. One of the examples of differences is that if you build a plane, you can build it with many fewer parts than building a bird, because you don't have to worry about laying eggs, You don't have to worry about digesting worms, and you don't have to worry about running away from dogs. So similarly, our brains do a lot of things besides giving rise to consciousness, and those things need not be our concern. But again, different substrate will mean different thinking. And while the buzzword of the transhumanist movement is the singularity is near, I think the truth is closer to the singularity is queer. Faster minds will mean freer thoughts. And many ideas that have arisen from human minds will be abandoned when our human minds are transplanted to a new substrate. So let me say a few words now about can it be done? Can we, in fact, have any practical way to create consciousness in the brain, in a software brain? Mind files don't have to approach anywhere near 100% of all of the information stored in our brain. So it's another reason why we don't have to match the human brain to still have consciousness. Most of us only remember a small percent of what we experience. During the coffee break, several of us were talking about that we wouldn't mind leaving large tranches of our memories behind. But whether we want to or not, it's automatically. We don't remember very much from day to day. And that's why, again, going back to Matt Moore's presentation, the notion that there is a singular self is perhaps somewhat of a fiction, because so much of us are fresh every day that we're born. Mannerisms, personality, feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and values, these things are not infinitely variable. There are finite sets that repeat across people. For ourselves, it's just a pattern of our mannerisms, the pattern of our information processing that continues day to day and month to month. So creating consciousness is likely to be a lot simpler than replicating every single synapse even in the higher portions of the brain. Here's a few fascinating mind file facts. The brain has a short memory. It's amazing that most of us can recognize only several hundred faces. I'm sure we all have the experience of eventually we see people and they remind us that, oh, they look like somebody else that we've seen. You know, the more people you meet, the more similar faces begin to appear. Anthropologists tell us that there's just a half dozen universal facial expressions. Emotions, a few dozen. Thoughts retained each day, just about 10% of the previous days. So while there are many, many more things in our brains than we recall, that which we recall and is part of our conscious mind is just a small percentage. In fact, just 1 hour a day of mind file deposits are enough to complete 100,000 of the Bainbridge questions. The Bainbridge questions are personality inventory questions that the social psychologist William Bainbridge developed over a period of 10 or 15 years, and he believes are well validated to replicate human personality. With an hour a day, you could upload, label, and emotion code 100,000 digital images of your life. You could have 2,000 hours of video of yourself, just talking, just doing the things that you like to do. I mean, with an hour a day, I think most of us capture almost everything which is of value. There are projects which allow you to do this. I'll mention the ones that I'm involved with. There are 3 of them, really 2, but now sort of 3. The LifeNot project, the CyberRev project, and now we have put the Bainbridge personality questions on a Android phone. It's under Personality MD. You can download it from Google Marketplace. And for free, any place that you are, you can complete your Bainbridge question, waiting for a bus, waiting for a tram, sitting in an office, and everything can be stored into your mind file. Now, a mind file is not a conscious being. It's just the raw material from whence consciousness can come. What's necessary next is to activate the mind file with mindware. Today, there is no mindware. But mindware is something that would enable equivalent functionality to a biological mind from which the mind files were abstracted. In essence, what mindware does is it auto-tunes to your true personality and your true consciousness based on a artificial intelligent processing of all of your mind files. So I get asked a lot, what really makes us unique? Are we just software programs that mindware could make? Well, first, as Marvin Minsky would say, there's nothing so bad about being a software program. It's just a term of English words to say that somebody processes information in a particular way. Up on the screen here, there's a formula, which is just an example. I'm not saying this is how mindware would ultimately operate. I think it would be even much more sophisticated than this. But even if you just assume that there were 5 different basic types of personality, this is a common view among psychologists today, like extrovert, introvert, 5 basic kinds of personality. And if for each person was given a ranking from minus 100, minus 99, minus 98, minus 97, all the way to 0, and then positive 1, positive 2, positive 3, up to positive 100, in terms of how much they embodied that personality characteristic or were the opposite of that personality characteristic. We have 201 different levels of a personality, and that could be analyzed for each of 5 different basic personality types. If you did that, the number of different mindware-derived personalities to which you could be auto-tuned based on your mind files would be over 300 billion different personalities. And my argument is that we would find ourselves very comfortable, each of us here in this room, within one of those 300 billion different personalities. And this is just a simple example. I think the actual mindware will be more sophisticated even than this. There are what I think are the beginnings of mindware today. Gameware avatars, autonomous cars, social chatbots, AI engines like Novamente is developing. So a lot of people are working on mindware. It's one of, it tells me it's likely to come when so many people are working on it. And unlike my great love of space colonies, working on mindware it's kind of easy because, it really requires software and computer terminal, maybe lots of processing power, but you can share that and it's getting cheaper. It's not as hard as capturing an asteroid and building something in space. So I think mindware will come around much more quickly than the O'Neill colony. Once you develop mindware, the next thing we will see will be mind clones. Mind clones will be copies of real people's mind. Here you see a scene from Hanson Robotics. They are working on mind clones. And ourselves in the Harrison movement, We've tried to begin the first developments of a mind clone with the Bina 48. So a mind clone is simply a copy of a person's mind that is so accurate that the person has a shared common identity with their biological original. Back to our friends, the biologists at the beginning, many of them would claim whatever cyber consciousness you're building here is not alive. That's the real criticism that is raised most often. Anything you build in cyberspace, it's not alive. So it's not real. It's just a puppet. It's like a duck, a wooden duck that can defecate, but has no intentionality, as Max pointed out. So I give here a few points of view that I think will come from other people about cyber consciousness. Schrodinger, if he were around, I think he'd feel cyber consciousness was alive, because he would see in its code the ability for self-replication and maintenance against disorder. He would see in its code extropy. I think Darwin would feel that cyber consciousness was alive, because he would see in its code the capability for replication, mutation, variation, and natural selection. All of the mindware produced variants that were not auto-tuned to acceptance would be put in the trash can. Only the mind clones that were just like us would be selected. That's natural selection. And were Galileo around, I think Galileo, looking at this project, would feel cyber consciousness was good and alive. Because just as he argued with regard to the telescope, he would say that something that savors reality, that contributes to a better enjoyment of reality, I mean, that's what the telescope did, that gives us a fresh lens on the wonder of creation. That's what cyber consciousness will do. These are good things. These are things that any creator would have wanted to see. Now, there is also the what I call the biological essentialist point of view. This is a cartoon. You can't read the text, so I'll basically summarize it for you. The young lady is upset that her boyfriend dumped her the previous night because he was uploading himself, downloading himself, and then uploading himself into a foglet, nanobot swarm community, and burning his biomass left behind. Her best friend is saying, oh, come on, downloading is pretty fucking far from suicide. He's still the same guy he was before. But perhaps because he dumped her, she felt it was the same difference. He was dead to her. I believe Richard Morgan really has a handle on this issue when he says in Altered Carbon, the naked fear of sleeving is just paranoid essentialism with its back to the wall. Sleeving is the notion that you take your mind clone and you give it a fresh instantiation, perhaps in an ectogenetically created flesh body or a nanobio body. But the idea that the body is just a canvas is the concept of sleeving. And people who are biological essentialists, they're frightened of that. They don't like that idea. I'd like to now talk about a few implications of mind loading. One of them is that we would have to start to recognize a fourth domain of life beyond archaea, bacteria, and eukaryota. There would be what I call digitea, an entire fourth domain of life that was branched out from hominids, the same way that eukaryotes branched out from bacteria. Another implication is that techno-immortality would become possible, one of the ways it would become possible, because if your substrate does not wear out the way a flesh body does, then you continue yourself through substrate after substrate after substrate. I'm sorry to show this instrument of death, but I actually couldn't quickly enough find a nicer airplane. But it's kind of funny that these planes, B-52s, were built, the ones that are flying today, and there's lots of them, were built before the pilots flying them were born. And many of them will be still flying after the pilots who are flying them, who were not born when they were built, will have already died even of old age. And of course, the idea is that the schematics and the idea of the B-52 is like a mind file. It's something that continues onwards and onwards. And the substrate is continually replaced and refreshed. So it's the same sort of thing with techno-immortality for mind clones. Once you're able to abstract consciousness, techno-immortality is all but inevitable. One of the most fascinating implications of mind loading is what Max Moore described in his talk, that of evolved identities. And because Max covered this so well, I won't dwell on it, but already we've gone through lots of iterations of consciousness, lots of iterations of self, lots of iterations of identity, lots of iterations of person. I think that all of us have a gut feel that the sense of self and identity that hominids had before they had language, before they had any way to even talk about you and me and self, was a very different concept of self than the idea of self after language evolved. And the idea of self, once we moved into large communities of beyond tribes, beyond clans, into global communities, into Facebook communities, into social networks, is a different notion of self than existed, a few thousand years ago. And as Max pointed out, we're moving into a kind of integral consciousness. And so I think one of the most fascinating implications of mind cloning is the idea of no more one mind, one body. One mind will transcend multiple instantiations. And we'll both have stronger identities, as Max pointed out, but also more interwoven identities. I'd also like to say that everything I presented today is a hypothesis. I have no proof that consciousness is possible outside of the brain. It's never been measured. But many people take the point of view that it's impossible to measure consciousness, that consciousness is a subjective phenomenon, and therefore we'll never know if there's consciousness in IT substrate. And that I disagree with. I think there is something which we can agree to be called an objective consciousness. And objective consciousness is basically consciousness as determined by others. It's the gist of the Turing test. And cyber consciousness can do that. For example, every time a criminal is brought into court for a crime, and an element of the crime is intent, nobody really knows if the criminal had the intent to do something or not. We can't go inside the criminal's mind. But by general agreement, we say outside people, a jury, a judge, a group of peers, family, friends, society, whatever, their opinion as to whether or not the individual had intent is acceptable. That is our measure of intent. And that's how society runs. We routinely allow outside people to measure conscious states. And that's all that Turing was saying. And that's what we'll achieve with cyber consciousness. When outside people feel that cyber conscious beings are humanly conscious, they'll be accepted as that. So objective consciousness is conscious as determined by others. My point is objective consciousness is good enough. So to wrap up here, the biological essentialists, you recall, said they wanted to dispel the notion that brains were computers and consciousness could emerge from computation. But what I've tried to point out today is that whether brains are computers or not is the wrong question. It's the question of whether or not autonomy and empathy, semantics and subjectivity can arise from pattern associations regardless of substrate. Consciousness is what consciousness does. The TerraSem hypothesis says that consciousness will arise from sufficiently advanced mindware applied to sufficiently detailed mind files. It's a falsifiable hypothesis as laid out by Karl Popper. It will be able to be proven whether it's true or not. So I think the testing should proceed. I think the odds are in its favor. And I invite all of you to join the testing by creating your own mind file at LifeNot or CyberRec. Thanks.
We have time for one question, and again, Audrey has the only question.
All right, it's a slightly complicated question, perhaps a slightly operational one. So, as you just said in your last slide, it's really important to try to get evidence for whether this will work, or whether it will work. And as I understand it, what you're doing at the moment, and what you're developing at the moment, is a way of capturing a large amount of data. But when we think about how the mind files would be implemented in mindware, I guess you're thinking in terms of somehow condensing that data into something that we might call a program that would actually run. Okay? Now, it seems to me that one big test of whether this is possible is to try to develop some kind of mapping of that sort from data to program, such that we could ask whether the program seems to converge. In other words, whether as you add more and more files, the program changes less and less as time goes on. So do you have any project to try to do that? To actually develop a mapping from data to programs, so you could ask that question?
Yes, we do. And
I don't know whether you need to repeat the question or anything.
Okay, the question was, do we have any program in place to really complete the experiment, to not just collect the raw data, which would be the mind files, but to actually collapse the raw data with mindware into a cyber-conscious being. And so we've got three...
That's right. Not necessarily a cyber-conscious being that can run, but at least some programmatic representation, so that you can ask the question, is it changing more and more slowly as you add more data? And is it converging?
Right, okay, so whether or not we are, say, on the track to creating a cyber-conscious being. So the answer is yes. We have three parallel efforts going on. Plus, we spend a lot of time monitoring the efforts of other people throughout the world, because a lot of people are active in this area in a lot of different fields. The three efforts we have going on, one is based in the UK with a group called iCogno. And these guys are, to use the slang word, they're chatbot experts. But, you know, chatbot is sort of a slang term, and it has a bit of a bad reputation as kind of a robotic relational database. But in fact, I think chatbots are, as I mentioned in the talk, are one of the kernels from which mindware are growing as the chatbots get more and more sophisticated. So the LifeNot team regularly funds the iCogno team over in the UK, who are continually upgrading the chatbot engine available on LifeNot. The chatbot engine on LifeNot is tied to each individual mind file. So the more you converse with what's called your avatar on LifeNot, the more you like, MindFlow like, your avatar will be. And it will be that way more and more for two reasons. One, because the more you talk with it, the more it understands how you parse words and answer questions. It remembers your previous responses. Separately, the syntactical work being done by the iCognitive team is getting better and better all the time. Every year or so, they issue a major upgrade of our engine. We have not run a scientific benchmark test to say, are we better now than we were a year ago? However, anecdotally, everybody's impression is that their avatars are much sharper than they were a year ago, are giving many fewer stupid answers and many more smart answers. The same process is going on with regard to the Bina 48 project with Hanson Robotics. They're a group out of Texas, and they're under contract with us to continue to improve the Bina 48. They actually don't even call it a chatbot engine, they call it a syntactical engine. And so they're constantly improving it. The latest, right now, Bina 48 regularly interacts with many strangers in Second Life and on the web. And one of the major things that they're working on now is to begin to give Bina 48 intentionality in the sense that she will be able to semi-randomly go out into the web and inquire upon things on her own volition and integrate that information. As some of you may have read, there are other academic teams doing very similar things with their own AI departments. And then finally, we have our own little homegrown effort at CyberRev, led by a guy, Mike Clancy, who is an expert in syntactical and semantic relational database engines, and just generally a database expert. And he is building the database running your mind file on CyberRev. So we've kind of got like multiple different efforts going this way. Everybody's impression is that if you came to any of our chatbots a year ago versus now, that you would see a big difference. I have to say, I myself definitely see a big difference. The next step is to really improve the experiment, creating a standardized sort of test so that we can then report improvements over time. Aubrey, that's something we definitely positively should do. It should actually move to like the top of our to-do list. It would give us a lot more scientific credibility. But I have to admit that we are not doing that right now.
Hold on, Martine, I think we're going to have one very short question by you.
Okay. It's about how you said consciousness is much simpler than the required processing power the brain really has. I mean, you can have consciousness in much simpler systems. But what about the subconscious mind and all its creative reference that it provides us? With each mind file have to eventually have the processing power to have its own subconscious, or perhaps do you envision the subconscious as something that could be merged, sort of like the internet, cloud computing? You have the cloud, the subconscious cloud, and then you have like the conscious mind files that only need the processing power for the individual. So how do you picture it mostly out of is it discarding the subconscious, or you have like a picture of what you envision as subconscious?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, Kim. The question was, how will cyber consciousness include the subconscious mind? And I think that we believe that the subconscious mind is immanent in the conscious mind, embedded in the conscious mind. For example, in the presentation, I mentioned that if we agree with psychologists that there are 5 basic personality types, and that everybody can be measured along these personality types, that either they are not that personality type, are, and to varying degree. And then the combination of all of these different personality types is ultimately us, okay? That's our conscious personality. But all of our sub-measurements that go into that personality type, that is our subconscious mind. We are influenced a little bit, like, you might not believe this, but I'm really an introvert. I'm really nervous up here, okay? And I have in my subconscious a lot of things going on right now. But I think that can be discerned. If you study 2,000 hours of my video on 100,000 questions of my Bainbridge answers, and tens of thousands of my tagging of digital images, if you read my journal diary, all of these different examples of beings, of mental elements of beingness, I think you would be able to have an excellent understanding of my subconscious, better even than Woody Allen's psychiatrist understands his subconscious mind from the hours of therapy. So I think it is possible to see the subconscious in the consciousness, and the mindware will have to do this because the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, I believe, are linked together like a braid. And we cannot be who we are without the subconscious mind. The example I give is that I think each of us are like an iceberg floating in the ocean. What we see is the little bit above the water. That's the conscious mind. And everything underneath the water is the unconscious mind. So unconscious mind is maybe the most important part.
So it's embedded. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Just a very, very short question. And my question is, one wonders, people who make any investment in a mind file wouldn't be more likely to be actually interested in developing a mind child as opposed to a mind clone. Because most of us, especially transhumanists, I would say, would be probably more inclined in enhance, improve, change, or alter some personality trait. So at the end of the day, accuracy might not be even a goal for this kind of project. That is, one would like probably to leave behind, say, a memory itself, or say a copy of itself, or herself with some differences after all, as we try to evolve during our biological life. Probably we would try to make the most of our mind file also in terms of possibilities. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I think it's very quickly in answering the question, you get close to what Max Bohr was talking about in terms of what exactly is our identity and what is the self. I believe that each one of us is ourselves a mind child every fresh day. I know when I wake up in the morning, I do a sort of like game with myself. I say, you know, I'm a new person today. I'm a completely fresh person today. What do I want to do with myself? Today is the first day for a brand new life. Of course, we cannot escape, 40, 50 years of history, of the patterns of who we are. But also, we cannot escape our parents. I mean, you go and you cannot escape your siblings and your friends. All of those people are inside your mind file, okay? So each of us, I think, is a mind child of ourselves every day, and the cyber conscious version of ourselves will be another kind of mind child of ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martine. So let's move on to the program. First, we're going to shorten this session. I'm going to remove my own talk from this session and place the first one of the afternoon session. Because these styles will not be able to handle. So, and I'm really looking for a diplomatic way of saying what I wish to say now. I believe that most of the presidents must have realized that there are some, how to say, some kind of discussions going on in Italian transhumanist community, that someone doesn't agree with somebody else, that some people say unpleasant things about the ideas of other transhumanists. And as a result, there are two different transhumanist organizations in Italy. One is called Italian Transhumanist Association, which is represented here, among many others, by Stefano, Riccardo, and myself. And the other is called a Network of Italian Transhumanists. And of course, one thing that we did not want to do is to give any kind of impression, and we didn't want to contribute to this kind of tension, which is, in my opinion, is very much exaggerated by some people. And we didn't want to give the impression that only one of the two organizations is running this event, because it is not so. As a matter of fact, we have here now Giuseppe Vatinno, who is an exponent of the network of Italian transhumanists. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of all the people of the IIT here. He is, well, he has two main interests and two main activities to describe them all. He has just published this little book, which is one of the very few introductions to transhumanists that have been published in Italy. He's also a professor with the Polytechnic University of Milan. I want to give the floor to Giuseppe for his talk about transhumanism, a philosophy for 21st century man. The talk will be in Italian, but I think that Giuseppe is going to persuade the translator. We had yesterday, to whom I'd like to offer an applause because she's really maybe we don't translate everything because we run out of time, but we just translate the key concepts in the offer. Thank you very much. Floor to you, Giuseppe.
Buongiorno a tutti, sono Giuseppe Vatinno, come avete sentito dall'introduzione precedente. Volevo fare un ringraziamento per l'invito, che segna un momento di coordinazione di intenti tra i due chapter in cui attualmente sono presenti in Italia, la IT e il Network Transumanisti Italiani. Stiamo lavorando da tempo per diciamo, trovare un punto di convergenza per il futuro con l'amico Stefano Lai da Tampa, che ci conosciamo da tanti anni, e cerchiamo di superare i precedenti contrasti che sono nati su problemi anche di fondo, diciamo, dell'interpretazione del transumanesimo in Italia. È importante.
So I would like to thank the invitation to this conference because it's a first instance of the kind of work that is being done to converge between the two current organizations about transhumanism existing in Italy, and it's being done between friends.
Così inizio a fare un breve excursus basandomi sui capitoli del libro che ho pubblicato
sui principali concetti transumanisti. Il titolo è una nuova filosofia per l'uomo del XXI secolo, vuole in qualche maniera cercare di sdoganare dal punto di vista culturale, intellettuale il transumanesimo. Perché? Perché questo editore, anche Armando Editore, è un buon editore, nel senso che è riconosciuto come diciamo, importante nella libreria italiana ed è il primo libro quindi che in Italia esce diciamo, con un editore di un certo peso, un'operazione culturale, politico-culturale alquanto difficile in un paese arretrato dal punto di vista dell'innovazione tecnologica e scientifica come l'Italia.
The first chapter of this presentation is transhumanism as a philosophy of the 21st century, and it is an attempt to deliver transhumanism to the cultural milieu of Italy, which is not a simple thing to perform because it's not exactly conducted to this kind of thing. And thanks to the editing publishing house, which is actually the first important publishing house that provides a book about transhumanism in Italy.
Questa è la copertina. Cos'è il transumanesimo? Chi ne ha paura? Allora,
what is transhumanism and who is afraid of it?
Yes, questa è una risposta che è un articolo che io ho scritto in risposta a Francis Fukuyama, che aveva attaccato il transumanesimo negli Stati Uniti come la più pericolosa idea del mondo.
This is a response to Orban when he wrote a few years ago that transhumanism is the most Fukuyama, that it's the most dangerous ideas in the world.
E così, diciamo, in un paese così difficile come l'Italia, appunto, in cui ancora ci sono resistenze da parte della Chiesa Cattolica e in generale della cultura influenzata ancora dalle idee di Croce, il famoso filosofo italiano, che ha bloccato lo sviluppo della cultura scientifica nel nostro paese. E quindi noi abbiamo un po' più di difficoltà che nel resto del mondo, appunto, l'impostazione filosofica e la presenza di una forte impostazione religiosa.
Italy has a very strongly religious perspective philosophically, so it's more difficult than other places in the world to propose this kind of view.
Abbiamo anche elaborato una strategia, diciamo, come gruppo del network italiano per affrontare il problema dell'integrazione con il mondo cattolico. Tant'è vero che siamo riusciti a fare un'iniziativa insieme alla diocesi di Pistoia, una settimana della teologia, diciamo, degli incontri teologici. C'è stato un nostro intervento che riportava nel libro sul transumanesimo e cattolicesimo, proprio per cercare un punto di convergenza tra i due mondi. So che dopo parlerà anche il responsabile della Chiesa mormone, che si occupa di transumanesimo. Noi stiamo facendo qualcosa di simile in Italia per l'integrazione culturale.
So we have a strategy to try to include transhumanism and the Catholic religion. So we have a few actions about some initiatives together.
Grazie. Sì, foto, Fermus, Maximor. L'inizio del mio percorso nel transumanesimo in particolare viene da un sito un po' espanso, che è il Principia Cibernetica Project, che è attualmente presente nel Belgio e negli Stati Uniti. Principia Cibernetica Project è un'iniziativa particolare che vuole spiegare la vita sia nei fondamenti psicologici e filosofici, ma anche della vita di tutti i giorni, sulla base di una filosofia cibernetica, Quindi io inizio ad occuparmi, sono appunto un fisico, campo di scienza, però di transumanesimo arrivo tramite questo sito. E chiaramente la prima cosa che trovo è Max More.
I just know that should be 1988.
Excuse me?
1988 or 1998.
88. Ah, ok. But this is for the foundation of Extropy Institute?
1988.
Ah, ok, thank you.
Okay, so the way I met transhumanism was through a site. It was called Principia Cybernetica. It's a very well-known one. And it's a project that is wish to explain life in terms of cybernetic principles. And the first figure that I came across is Max Born.
And this is Fukuyama. Abbiamo già parlato, la risposta, cioè diciamo, di questo consigliere, credo anche del Presidente degli Stati Uniti, che ritiene il transumanesimo la più pericolosa idea del mondo, ma così non è, e ho spiegato anche nel libro perché diciamo, il suo principale attacco è che il transumanesimo costituirebbe un problema per la democrazia, per il principio di uguaglianza, per l'accesso di tutte le persone alla tecnologia salvifica, diciamo così, ma noi possiamo vedere che il processo democratico mondiale porterà queste tecnologie a essere sempre meno costose e più cicli, più convenienti, e tutti potranno usufruire.
Okay, so this is Fukuyama, is the most known critic of transhumanism idea. His critic is saying that it's the most dangerous idea in the world because it put on the table a big problem for democracy and for equality. But basically what we are saying is that the distribution of these technologies would make them available more and more and more, accessible, less and less expensive.
Okay, grazie. This is a photo of Romana Machado, that is a person that I found in internet. La seconda persona che ho incontrato, che forse adesso è un po' più minoritaria, Romana Machado, non so se si pronuncia così correttamente, mi aveva colpito molto perché utilizzava il transumanesimo nella vita di tutti i giorni, dicendo cosa possiamo, come adesso Max More anche, dice fare da adesso nella vita di tutti i giorni, possiamo fare delle cose, quindi per esempio curare la propria mente, sia farmacologicamente che con tecniche cognitive, la cura del proprio corpo, una corretta alimentazione, migliorare l'esercizio fisico regolare, migliorare la propria situazione finanziaria, molto interessante, utilizzando al meglio tutte le possibilità che il capitalismo offre per essere poi liberi, protezione fisica per sé e le persone a noi care, organizzare la propria sospensione crionica. Romana.
So this is the third figure that I came across in transhumanism. Her name is Romana Machado, and what was very interesting about her is that she brings a perspective of how to bring transhumanism in everyday life. What is the kind of question that she asks, and what can be done now in order to go in this direction? So she's mentioning few principles there, taking care of our bodies, taking care of our mind, taking care of the way we live, taking care of our financial situation, because we are going to live longer, and taking care of our cryonic suspension.
Una storia del transumanesimo, diciamo, l'altro capitolo del libro, dall'inizio, diciamo, Marvin Minsky, 1960, proto-transumanesimo, Hans Mowarek, Raymond Kurzweil, Robert Ettinger, chiaramente, Università della California, 1980, FM 2030, che è un po' il fondatore, io non so pronunciare bene, Spadiari, credo che sia un Federico Spadiari, è un po' il fondatore, come voi ben sapete, del movimento che trova la formazione definitiva in Massimo Orban Moral 1988 e il vostro Danny Pierce, anche nel nostro convegno all'Università di Oxford, sanno bene questo, quindi non lo diciamo. Le correnti del transumanesimo, il singolarativismo, l'abolizionismo, il transumanesimo democratico, mettiamo un po' più in politica, il transumanesimo libertario, l'estropianesimo, il post-genderismo, l'immortalismo, il tecnogaiismo. Cioè, vediamo che il transumanesimo, come ogni importante filosofia movimento filosofia, si struttura in diverse sensibilità e dal punto di vista politico, quindi con una replica un po' della struttura politica normale delle democrazie occidentali sostanzialmente avanzate, quindi con una destra, un centro e una sinistra libertaria, e poi dal punto di vista degli interessi, quindi c'è l'interesse sul singolarativismo, che conosciamo benissimo, insomma. Uno dei principali parousie, cioè l'avvento della singolarità tecnologica, che è un po', se vogliamo fare un paragone religioso, la nostra attesa quasi messianica di un evento che cambierà completamente la vita del mondo, e poi le varie correnti, da cui mi vuole soffermare sull'estropianesimo, che comunque io abbraccio nell'ambito del transumanismo, quindi mi ritengo, anche se è chiuso l'istituto dell'estropianesimo, però comunque facendo riferimento a questa corrente fondata da Massimo.
This is a list of the different currents that can be seen in the transhumanist thought. So there is some that differ on the political ground, extropianism, to which is the one that I am recognizing myself.
Quindi conoscete la uploading, la crionica, e un interesse molto forte, per me, devo dirlo, The Grey. Ritengo che sia molto importante la parte sulla strategie di prevenzione dell'invecchiamento, e in una comunità mondiale con pochi fondi, poco denaro, è importante che ci diamo degli obiettivi di intervento. Probabilmente quello che segue The Grey è uno dei più importanti.
I think what the Gray is following is one of the most important objectives, because in a community that has not many funds, not many numbers, it's important to have objectives, targets that can be pursued.
Ecco, poi al volo un piccolo accenno sul simbolismo e transumanesimo, e quindi l'arte anche, ex machina libertas, la transtropia, che è una corrente americana, ovviamente abbastanza di destra, che però fa un ragionamento molto interessante sul rapporto col simbolo, anche Jung.
So this is the relation between humanism and symbols. There is a transtopia,
Yes, Jung, eccetera. Cibergale, un piccolo accenno al transumanesimo che si occupa di ecologia dell'artificiale, cioè dell'ambientalismo.
And this is transhumanism that deals with the ecological
avatar, eccetera, eccetera. La realtà aumentata è un altro settore che mi interessa moltissimo, perché permetterà di cambiare la nostra concezione del mondo, internet delle cose, qui abbiamo anche
augmented reality, the Internet of Things.
Bene, un piccolo accenno, stiamo correndo perché abbiamo poco tempo, sul cosmismo sovietico, che è stato un interessante antecedente culturale.
This was a cultural precedence. It's the cosmism, Russian, Soviet cosmism.
Yes. E Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, che è un po' il profeta visionario, appunto, che conoscete, atmosfera.
And Teilhard de Chardin, which was the prophet.
Ok. prende il verbo vinge naturalmente, è il singolare. Qui c'è ich bin in singolariam, cioè noi aspettiamo questa venuta. E Kurzweil è il profeta della singolarità.
Kurzweil is the prophet of singularity.
Okay. Abbiamo accelerato molto perché diciamo, siamo in ritardo, quindi un breve excursus del transumanesimo che segue i capitoli del libro, che in italiano, però se qualcuno è interessato, diciamo, poi tradurremo col tempo dei sunti in inglese.
So this was a very fast forward introduction to the main territories of transhumanism. Yes, maybe in the future there will be a translation in English of the book.
Thank you.
Si può fare una domanda veloce?
Preferirei di no, dobbiamo accelerare con il resto del programma, però Giuseppe è qui, tu sei qui, magari parlate. Keynote? PDF? PDF.
As a matter of fact, since we're going to need 2 or 3 minutes to load the file on the computer, actually we are going to allow your question to Giuseppe. Fagli pure la domanda perché comunque dobbiamo metterci un paio di minuti per caricare la prossima presentazione.
Sì,
Prego.
io volevo semplicemente chiedere qual è la strategia, perché lei prima ha parlato di in qualche modo integrarsi dal punto di vista culturale con i fattori sindicali. Volevo chiedere, ma non è rischioso nel senso che può veramente indebolire il potenziale rivoluzionario come transumanista, diciamo in questo modo generale, diciamo, e poi capisco che in Italia potrebbe essere una necessità, nel senso che abbiamo una situazione.
Ne abbiamo parlato molto, una domanda molto interessante, naturalmente sono parti colombe anche nel consumismo italiano, nel nostro gruppo, chi vuole essere totalmente duro e puro nei confronti dell'ideologia transumanista, chi invece vuole cercare una strategia in questa. Da un'attenta analisi, poi se noi vogliamo però far crescere il movimento transumanista, lo scontro frontale con il mondo religioso in generale, cattolico in particolare nel nostro paese, riteniamo che sia poco consigliabile, perché il tessuto sociale stesso dell'italiano, come sappiamo bene, è profondamente invertito di religiosità, cristianesimo in particolare, quindi diventa veramente complessa una strategia di entrata nel mondo, diciamo, culturale anche italiano, se ci presentiamo come una sorta di setta diciamo avulsa dal concreto vivere intellettuale della nostra nazione. Quindi dobbiamo cercare di trovare qualche punto di contatto. Del resto la Chiesa mormone sta avvicinando, so che c'è un rappresentante, ma mi pare che è transumanista. Quindi il rapporto tra Chiesa e transumanesimo deve, secondo noi, essere di dialogo. Poi certo si perde un po' di purezza, però la vita è dura.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, and too bad that we didn't have so much time, and I had to ask Giuseppe many times to accelerate. But anyway, he's here, you can ask questions to him. And if you are really curious about what he did not have time to say, you have a very simple solution, which is divide the group, which is outside. Yeah, but learning Italian, I believe, is something that can so much enrich culture of that everybody should have.
First wish. First
Right. We are going to make one more change to the program of the session. We are running out of time. In the afternoon, we will be able to recover the time. So we're going to have one last talk before the break. I'm going to move also Manuel Arti to the slots in the afternoon. And I'd like now to give the floor to my speaker, whom most of the presidents know, David Orban, who is also one of those persons who does too many things and has done too many things to be able to describe them in a few minutes. So without introducing David, his presentation, his introduction, I would like to give him the floor.
Thank you very much. All right. Hey, hello. Thank you, everybody. I don't like to speak sitting, but Giulio, I assume I should because of our viewers in Teleface, right? I should keep sitting. I don't.
For both using Teleface and
okay.
Your own songs, it was.
All right. I will try and keep tight. So. I have 106 slides, and that's true. And I will go through them very, very quickly because actually I wouldn't mind interacting with you people a little bit. And in order to do that best, I would like actually to start with some questions. The warm-up is, I think, extremely important. The exponentials that we see in front of us are still not fully understood by everybody. We have to go back to basics because these exponentials constantly bite us in the back. Very recently, and this will be one of the examples that I will concentrate on, there has been an announcement that the specialists following the field, talking about it at the Singularity University, have not expected for something like 5 to 10 years. And this has been the announcement by Google of their autonomous cars, having had the chance to go for over 140,000 miles in several months in California, driving autonomously. So, this is, I think, the fundamental equation that we have to deal with. Any goal you have, if it is achievable through an exponential increase, then don't worry if you have only achieved 1%, if you are halfway through your goal, because you are guaranteed that you will reach 100% in the rest of the time that you have in front of us. The most important thing is that you have to make sure that your backers, your financial backers, also understand this same concept. And it is so easy. Just count it out to them. For example, it took us 7 years to get to 1%, but we were doubling. Then 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and in another 7 years we will have reached our goal. So this is kind of a recipe that I hope a lot of us will be able and follow. Because of the fact that there are a few dozen people in this room and not thousands of people for our message to be debated is for me a grave alarm bell. It is not just a question of how good we are in giving a larger publicity to our ideas, but it is itself an existential threat. So, how many of you have heard or know or think they know about the Internet of Things? Okay, very good. So I can jump over a lot of introduction. I will go to some of more substantial considerations and potentially cut myself short for questions as well. The issue is that we can take so many things for granted today. We live in wonderful times, not only from the point of view of how wealthy we are, even if we don't realize, and how healthy we are, but from the point of view of how many things we can think of and have the luxury of trying out. The opportunity for failure is such a luxury, and we should strive and take advantage of it at its fullest. So I am trying. I have had something like a dozen and more startups, and basically all of them failed. So I am fulfilling my dreams of failing as much as I can. Luckily, that's just almost true. That's not completely true. So I can sustain myself and my family. Currently, I'm heavily involved with one of the latest startups, which is WhiteTag in California, specialized in the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, in my opinion, is a technological, industrial necessity, and also it is a social and philosophical supporting infrastructural element of what is coming next. From the point of view of its mechanics, it's fairly elementary. Intel and its peers are going to produce the next generation of chips, which are going to cost 1/10 or 1/100th of their previous generation per unit of computational power. And there will be very many of them, because unless there is or there are, they wouldn't be able to sustain their share price, and they want to, they have to, they want to survive. So soon we will be surrounded by hundreds and actually thousands of gizmos instead of just a dozen or a dozen, depending on how fanatic we are regarding smartphones or photo cameras or whatever else. And these will have to work under fundamentally different principles than we have been accustomed to previously. Exactly because of their numerosity. They will have to be autonomous. They will not be able to rely on us in helping them do something as simple as being recharged. And luckily, we are starting to see devices like these. For example, most of you will be familiar with this vacuum cleaner, which can find the wall socket when it needs to be recharged. Something as elementary as that can truly change our relationship with the mechanical world around. The network infrastructure that enables this is also very widely available. It is going to be available even more so through fourth generation networks. Yesterday I was in London, where The Economist awarded a series of prizes for innovations, as they do so yearly. One of them was awarded to Peter Thiel for financial innovation, another to Diamandis for innovation of innovation, to Steve Jobs in the consumer product categories, and to Alex Lightman as a representative of the technology for the next 10 years, for the next decade, for 4G, having written the book about 4G 10 years ago. So the network is going to be ubiquitous, and it is going to represent what the true conversations on the planet is going to be about. These are going to be machine-to-machine conversations that will involve humans in a fraction, in a vanishingly small fraction of their time, just like it already happens at LHC, the most complex, the most expensive machine humanity has ever built, for the purpose of throwing away 99% of the data that it generates and just picking out automatically and autonomously by the computers managing the data flow what humans should ever see. The data that these networks, which according to the terminology that we use are these spine networks, are going to be generated, actually are even larger than the ones I have forecasted here. We are currently generating 1.5 exabyte of data in the deep web per year, and in less than 10 years it will be it will have increased probably not by 300 but by more than 1,000 times. So what I'm talking about is a series of developments that are going to change the way we live every day, and are hopefully going to enable us and structure our society in more humane ways than it is structured today. The 10,000-year adventure that we have started when we embraced agriculture and our tool-making capabilities has really enslaved us in unexpected manners. And the opportunity we have today is to rethink and re-engineer our lives in a manner that frees us from this slavery, really, where we can ask interesting questions to ourselves, we can dedicate our lives to things that we like and to care about other people, contrary to what many of us have been able to do previously. There are luckily many people who have been devoting their energies here. Good people, bad people, surprising aggregations of various interests. And transhumanism has been a fairly controversial term, which for one reason or the other hasn't been embraced as widely as we would have liked. So it is not uncommon, I think, for many of us to discover fellow transhumanists who don't realize that they are, or who choose not to apply to themselves the term. So I don't know whether he does or doesn't, but the CTO of Intel is by any definition an as fervid transhumanist as any of us can be. And he very, very frequently talks about the merging of humans and machines in front of thousands of people. Now, the question that came to Aubrey regarding the singularity argument, I think is fairly important. I would also link it with the Fermi paradox, which our colleagues talking about cosmological schemes potentially are going to be talking about. I don't have a problem if humanity destroys itself as long as there is somebody else picking up the torch and trying to make sense out of the universe. The chances that we will not make it, I think, are pretty high. So as long as we have that responsibility as the only known intelligent species in the universe, I think it is our duty to try and make it. For the past 1,000 years, we didn't really realize how powerful we were, but we are at a point of the Anthropocene where it is going to be a few hairy decades until we understand, and in my opinion, it is going to be unavoidable that we actually cope with what we have become and embrace geoengineering. We embrace active intervention in what is going on in the planet, rather than just leaving it to blind forces and happenstance. And of course, things are around the horizon in many areas. Nanotechnology is one of those potential solutions that a lot of people would develop quicker than it is today, but it is going to be part of the solution to many of our problems, most likely. And so let me talk quickly about a few examples of what the substance of my message is. We have current examples of applications of the Internet of Things in environmental monitoring, in energy management, going towards what is going to be very important as we adopt alternative energy generation methods, for example, solar. It will be impossible to deploy them at wide scale unless we also re-engineer our energy grid to what is called a smart grid. And we have the applications that were supposed to be part of the future and are coming towards us with a very, very quick series of developments. I mentioned transportation, 4G. The quantified self also, I think, is an extremely important area, and one that should be close to the heart and interest of many transhumanists. A rational approach to understanding what we are from the point of view of the parameters of our bodies is the first step if you want to be able to modulate those parameters towards a set that is more satisfying to what you feel your identity represents. And of course, if you don't measure the moves that you make in that phase space could end you up in a place that is rather different from your optimum. And this is from the point of view of the individual. In the UK, and we have people from Great Britain here, so I would like to get a confirmation on this. But if I'm not mistaken, the National Health Service has made more or less explicit moves towards basically making sure that you live responsibly, otherwise they will not cover you. So latent diabetes and certain lung diseases that are due either to obesity or to smoking are not going to be covered by the National Health Service because they are a consequence of individual choice, according to them. And in closing, basically, I would like to spend a few more sentences talking about these wonderful robotic cars. And Google surprised everybody with their announcements, the specialists too, as I mentioned. And they are being, even in my opinion, rather honest about what these cars are going to represent. They say, for example, that they think there could be a 50% reduction in mortality. I would rather think that the mortality should be reduced in a widespread use of autonomous cars by 99%. They don't drink, they don't get distracted, they don't text, they don't fall asleep, they are capable of not stopping at a stoplight. So I don't know what causes of death there could be associated with a car that they shouldn't be able and eliminate. Another issue is that of efficiency and capital utilization. We complain if we have to drive more than a couple of hours a day, and still that means that whatever investment we made in building it, acquiring and using our cars through its life is an investment that pays its rewards 10% of the time or less. So what electric cars could actually mean in self-driving conditions, once you will be able to call one up with your nth generation smartphone to pick you up and go buy groceries or bring your family to on the holiday, and of course the two cars would be very different, is that once you are done with your shopping or once you are on the beach, the car would go and service somebody else, and it would be on the road 24 hours of the time. So that will be an interesting choice, because one branch is to say, well, it will be easy. We will just have 1/10 of the cars. But there is a paradox. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the gentleman who invented this paradox of maximal utilization of a resource, which would actually mean that we will still have that many cars as we have today, doing 10 times as many trips, which would mean that we will have many more opportunities to meet with our fellow humans, and that would be quite wonderful. I will not go into detail for 3D printing, the manufacturing revolution that 3D printing can potentially represent, the personal production, the elimination of the immensely long logistics chains that today's globalized world entail are going to be humongous. And if you haven't read Cory Doctorow's Makers or his latest For the Win, those explore very interesting angles of how online labor and online organized labor together with personal manufacturing, virtual worlds are possibly going to impact what we do and what we are. Now, once again, this is not going to happen by itself. So anybody who feels that they can just lay back and wait for the singularity deserve not to be applauded. Actually, I would go even farther, especially in societies like Italy. We have a strange paradox where we are rich enough to pay a lot of people to do damage to society. And these are mostly the state-employed bureaucrats who, even if in a tiny percentage of, let's say, 1 in 1,000, are honest enough that they feel they should be doing something during the day other than nothing, that is enough to do immense damage. Because what they will do is to enact the bureaucratic rules that will slow so many things down. So I am thinking of actually starting to actively promote the thought that we should take and be more courageous and tell these people, we will pay you, just stay home. Have fun, watch television. As long as you do nothing, things will work so much better. So the collaboration that is going to be needed to pull this off, as many other of the things that we are trying to achieve, is going to be really unprecedented. But if we are going to make it, I think that it is going to be a lot of fun. The co-evolution that we are already experiencing, the intermixing of cultures, of values, is going to be really thrilling. And we will be able to human again under a really new definition, a more exciting, a larger definition of humanity in front of us. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, that's not a question, that's a disagreement. Well, I strongly disagree with the sentence in the countries where you have a lot of bureaucrats, it's not working. Well, at the moment, in the countries where you have the most bureaucrats, it's there that you have the longest life expectancy, and it's still working this way at the moment. So I don't say in the future, and I don't pretend that it's not a problem, but
at the moment it's working better in this country. Okay, but now I have my question is. My question is, do you think that you mentioned that there are very few people really interested in all the transhumanist aspects? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing for you? Because you say one or two times it's not going to happen if we are not doing something, but actually it's not true. There are a lot of progresses who are going to happen, especially if most people are not active.
Okay.
So for me, it's a political and philosophical very important question.
Yes.
But let's go back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, internet didn't exist, and there was never a political debate about the fact, is it well? Okay. And maybe it was a good thing that there was no
Sure.
political debate. So
Sure.
my question is, for the next 20 years, do you wish a public debate, big public debate, or want to?
Okay.
I
understand your question. Let me repeat it concisely for the camera. The question is, couldn't it be that not having a very large and visible political debate about transhumanism is actually good, because the developments required or the goals of transhumanism will be achieved while otherwise they would be potentially prohibited or slowed down or blocked. And I don't wish to avoid the debate. I think that it would be dishonest to avoid the debate and to stay in front of 99% of the population and saying, hey, so we tricked you into arriving at a future that you didn't realize was coming, and now there is no way back. Too bad, we don't have the time to think about it anymore. It's here now. So I think it is honest to have the debate. And it is also dangerous not to have the debate because, for example, in the case of autonomous cars, the single most important reason why these could not be ubiquitous as shortly as 5 years from now is for insurance reasons. Unless a framework is there to understand who is responsible for paying for the damages that an accident will create, whether it is the owner, whether it is the maker of the car, whether it is the maker of the software, whether it is Google who provides the constant data flow through Google Maps. And I don't know, we have Twitter fail whale all the time. So what if the data flow is interrupted and the car crashes? So if the insurance company is not involved, if the legislation, the political process is not there, then large-scale deployments could not happen. Or another example is stem cells. The U.S. stem cell legislation is born out of ignorance. How can we risk of minimizing the opportunity for good legislation if we let them live in obscurity and ignorance? So I think there is no alternative than a debate. There was a question there, and then you, and I will try and finish in time. You didn't have a question? Oh, okay, sorry.
I have a question, but should we really force our ideas and people would be placed then outside in the public domain and people just don't pick them up, just ignore them as irrelevant? Should we then force the debate on people or just say, okay, we placed it in the public, we didn't pick it up?
The question is, should we force the answers that a certain debate might find out to the public if they rather prefer and ignore the issues? Or if we bring them the knowledge, but they don't want to embrace knowledge, what should happen? So, democracy is a very nice experiment that we have been playing with for a short period of time. And I don't know whether it is the best answer that we have if our objective is survival. So even in societies that call themselves democratic, like Italy or the US or others, there are certain laws that very quickly enable government to stop pretending and declare the martial law, for example. Very, very quickly. No objections. They just shot you if you raise your hand or dare to speak. So I could very well envision many scenarios in which even if there were a debate, the answer would be given, and it would be forced upon everybody, because otherwise the alternative would be a civilizational breakdown.
It was not about us forcing the answer, it was just when we put the information out there and no one picks it up, because people just think that the topics we're discussing here are simply irrelevant. So should we do anything about it or just let it be?
Okay, the follow-up question was, what if the information is there, but others think it is irrelevant? The best measure for that is funding. So if funding is not made available, it's those who enlarge it, like it's public bodies, the EU, for example, the European Union or the European Commission, don't think it matters, or hardcore capitalists. So, for example, strong AI or artificial general intelligence, if possible, that would be the final ultimate singularity enabler. And still, Ben Goertzel, who is one of the practitioners and believers in the worthiness of this line of research, is not swimming in funding. It would be very, very easy to make a lot of money if somebody had strong AI responding to his or her orders. So neither the public bodies nor hardcore capitalists are actually voting with their money to fund these ideas. So can Ben go out and take a pistol and take the money from one or the other? He cannot. He cannot. I think we should be wrapping up. Okay, thank you very much, and I will be glad to answer your questions.
So let's conclude the session for the lunch break, since we have to move two talks to the afternoon. I'd like to ask everyone if you can be so kind to be here, not at 3, but at -15. If you could be here at 2:45, we are going to be able to recover the time. Second thing, I have put a sheet of paper here with a pen for the people who want to come to the conference dinner tonight. I know that some of you have already booked the ticket. So those of you who have bought the ticket don't have to write your name here. But I'd like to ask the others if you want to come to the dinner tonight, to write your name exactly like Giuseppe Vatinno is doing.
Well, if you can't remember whether you've got the ticket.
Here. Just write your name. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you all at 2:45.
I wondered when you were going to take your test. I wondered when you were going to take your test.
Yeah, it's just like